Coming up in this week's Torah Pearls.
How does the command to wear fringes on the four corners of a garment put a nice wrap on Torah portion Shelach?
When it comes to competing lists of 12 tribes, what is a Josephic envelope?
What does Psalm 95 have to do with the spy narratives in the book of Numbers?
So the Moses scroll refers to Joshua, son of Nun, but was his name originally Hoshea?
Hey, whose idea was it to send the spies anyway?
What does it mean where Moses says to head north into the south?
All right, Jono, let's jump in.
Let's get going. G'day, dear viewers, and thank you for joining us. Ross and Jono with you once again, and it's time for Season 3 of Torah Pearls. This week, we are in Torah portion Shelach. Numbers chapter 13 through to the end of chapter 15. Assisting us, of course, is our AI critical scholar, Ezra. Ezra, kick us off with an academic summary of Shelach.
All right, let's dive into Shelach, one of the more dramatic and psychologically rich portions in the Torah. From a scholarly lens, particularly through the documentary hypothesis, this portion is a patchwork of multiple sources, primarily the priestly and Yahwist traditions, with some Elohist material woven in. At the heart of the portion is the spy narrative, 12 men sent to scout the land of Canaan. It's a fascinating case of narrative duplication. Scholars note there are two layers here. The Deuteronomist retelling in Deuteronomy has Moses initiating the mission, while here in Numbers, it's Yahweh who commands it. That's a classic example of editorial redaction trying to reconcile two traditions. The theological tension is clear. The land is good, but fear overrides faith. 10 of the spies stir panic, leading to Israel's infamous rebellion. This becomes a foundational explanation for the generation's 40-year wilderness wandering, an ideological story, if you will, to explain Israel's delayed entry into the land. The priestly source chimes in strongly with laws inserted after the rebellion, almost as a literary salve, rituals about grain offerings and tzitzit, perhaps to recenter a shaken community. It's not random. It's redaction with purpose, linking disobedience with a renewed call to ritual obedience. And then there's the brief but chilling episode of the man gathering sticks on the Sabbath, a priestly insertion reinforcing boundaries. The text is saying, in moments of national crisis, fidelity to law still matters. So Shelach isn't just a tragic spy tale. It's a tightly crafted theological and editorial response to Israel's failure, shaping identity through narrative, law, and liturgy.
Well, thank you, Ezra.
An example of editorial redaction trying to reconcile two traditions, Ross, is what Ezra just said. And what that does is it gives us the opportunity to supply some background, because what we find here with this particular tradition is that we're dropped in the middle of a narrative. How did we get here? What is happening? We don't have that. We're halfway through the narrative here, Ross, and I thought what we should do is supply the background from both the Moses scroll and from the book of Deuteronomy, just to give us some context.
Okay.
So what I might do is begin with the shorter of the two. That would be the Moses scroll. It's the briefest of accounts. So what I'll do is read to you what is commonly referred to as the narrative of the spies, or the sin of the spies. Okay. And this is what the Moses scroll has to say about that. You ready?
I'm ready, man.
All right, quote. End quote. And that is because the Moses scroll has nothing to say about the 12 spies. However,
wow, we're already done. I was thinking this would be.
That's it. There's nothing about the 12 spies in the book of in the scroll of Moses, the Moses scroll, the Shapiro document. What we do have, though, is the context around which Deuteronomy places or mentions this narrative, and so I think that's probably worth reading just to remind everybody. And people who are familiar with the Moses scroll will know this, because this is the way that it begins. It says, Elohim, our Elohim, spoke to us in HOREB, saying, you've dwelt long enough at this mountain, HOREB, mountain. Turn and set out for yourselves and go to the hill country, the Amorites, and to all of their inhabited places in the Arava, in the mountains, in the foothills, and the coast of the sea. And we set out, Ross, from HOREB, and we walked all that great and fearful wilderness that you saw, and we came to Kadesh Barnea. And I said to you, you've come today to the hill country of the Amorites. Go up and possess the land as he spoke to you. But you were unwilling to go up, and you murmured, and you said, in hatred of us, to exterminate us. And Elohim was angered, and he swore, saying, as I live, surely all the people who have seen my signs and my wonders, that I did these 10 times, since they have not listened to my voice, they will not see the good land that I swore to give to their fathers, except their little ones, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun, who stand before you. They'll go there, and I will give it to them. That's it. That's the context around where Deuteronomy places this narrative.
So you're telling me, you're telling our viewers, I think I've seen this before, but you're saying that Deuteronomy has, I'm sorry, that the Moses Scroll has a narrative that sort of goes along with the placement here, but it doesn't have anything about the spies? Is that?
Nothing about the spies.
Nothing about the spies.
So this is the way that Deuteronomy picks up, and this is in Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 6 to 7. It says, Jehovah our God spake to us in HOREB, saying, and this is borrowing obviously from the Moses Scroll. I'm using your ASV.
Okay.
Ye have dwelt long enough in this mountain. Turn you and take your journey and go to the hill country of the Amorites and unto all the places nigh thereunto. I love that. In the Arabah, in the hill country, and in the lowland. And then it continues, and it adds significantly, Ross. There's a whole lot of padding here in Deuteronomy that is not in the Moses Scroll. But then the narrative picks up again in verse 19. And what I'm going to do, I think, is get Ezra to read Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 19 to 40, and then we'll have a look at our Torah portion. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Let's do it.
And we journeyed from Horeb, and went through all that great and terrible wilderness which ye saw, by the way to the hill country of the Amorites, as Jehovah our God commanded us. And we came to Kadesh Barnea. And I said unto you, Ye are come unto the hill country of the Amorites, which Jehovah our God giveth unto us. Behold, Jehovah thy God hath set the land before thee. Go up, take possession, as Jehovah the God of thy fathers hath spoken unto thee. Fear not, neither be dismayed. And ye came near unto me, every one of you, and said, Let us send men before us, that they may search the land for us, and bring us word again of the way by which we must go up, and the cities unto which we shall come. And the thing pleased me well. And I took 12 men of you, one man for every tribe. And they turned and went up into the hill country, and came unto the valley of Eshcol, and spied it out. And they took of the fruit of the land in their hands, and brought it down unto us, and brought us word again, and said, It is a good land which Jehovah our God giveth unto us. Yet ye would not go up, but rebelled against the commandment of Jehovah your God. And ye murmured in your tents, and said, Because Jehovah hated us, he hath brought us forth out of the land of Egypt, to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites, to destroy us. Whither are we going up? Our brethren have made our heart to melt, saying, The people are greater and taller than we. The cities are great and fortified up to heaven. And moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakim there. Then I said unto you, Dread not, neither be afraid of them. Jehovah your God, who goeth before you, he will fight for you, according to all that he did for you in Egypt before your eyes, and in the wilderness, where thou hast seen how that Jehovah thy God bare thee, as a man doth bear his son, in all the way that ye went, until ye came unto this place. Yet in this thing ye did not believe Jehovah your God, who went before you in the way, to seek you out a place to pitch your tents in fire by night, to show you by what way ye should go, and in the cloud by day. And Jehovah heard the voice of your words, and was wroth, and sware, saying, Surely there shall not one of these men of this evil generation see the good land, which I swear to give unto your fathers, save Caleb the son of Jephunneh. He shall see it, and to him will I give the land that he hath trodden upon, and to his children, because he hath wholly followed Jehovah. Also Jehovah was angry with me for your sakes, saying, Thou also shalt not go in thither. Joshua the son of Nun, who standeth before thee, he shall go in thither. Encourage thou him, for he shall cause Israel to inherit it. Moreover, your little ones, that ye said should be a prey, and your children, that this day have no knowledge of good or evil, they shall go in thither, and unto them will I give it, and they shall possess it. But as for you, turn you, and take your journey into the wilderness by the way to the Red Sea.
So that's excellent. So that is, when people compare the two, you can see that this is one of the traditions
Yeah.
And the one that we're going to deal with in our Torah portion is another. And there are significant differences between the two, and we're going to address those. But none of this information is found in the Moses Scroll. Which begs the question, Ross, did the Moses Scroll fail to record this information that we find in Deuteronomy, or are there reasons to believe that Deuteronomy has added this information at a later date? We're going to talk about some of that. I'm going to suggest that perhaps it was the latter, and we may talk about things like the Wadi of Eshkol and the Anakim to perhaps support that idea.
Oh yeah, man, you got to at least mention giants. I love that kind of stuff.
You got to do that. All right.
Hey, have you ever seen? Wait. Have you ever seen those? We call them like a National Enquirer or one of those magazines where I used to remember as a kid being in line at the grocery store with my mom, and I'd look at and it showed they've discovered giants, skeletons or whatever, and the biblical giants. And I was thinking, man, that is so cool.
That must be true. That must be like, that's a real thing, And
that's right.
And I got to say, that was some pretty cool photo editing back in the day.
Oh man, just think what they could do now with AI.
Oh, that's right. But a lot of people love that stuff, and they thought, oh, this is absolutely true. Look, there's big giant skeletons. Why haven't we heard about this before? And they bought it hook, line, and sinker. But I do remember that, and everyone's like, oh, it's proof of the Bible because there's the giants. We're going to talk about that.
All right, cool.
But there's a background information. So we find ourselves here in chapter 13 of Numbers, and it begins this way, Ross. It says, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, send me men, send men to scout the land. Yep. Here's the first problem before we can even go any further.
That's right.
Because here in Numbers, it is Jehovah's command rather than the request of the people. Give us the details.
Yeah, I was just going to, since you covered that passage there, in Deuteronomy, it says something different, doesn't it? It says in verse 21, behold, Jehovah thy God hath set the land before thee. Go up, take possession, as Jehovah the God of thy fathers has spoken unto thee. Fear not, neither be dismayed. And ye, talking to the people, Moses talking to the people, ye came near unto me, every one of you, and said, let us send men before us, that they may search the land for us and bring us word again of the way by which we must go up in the cities unto which we shall come. So, totally different. In one, it's whose idea is it to send these spies? Is it their idea? Is it God's idea?
So let me just because you started reading from verse 6, was that right? 1 verse 6, is that where you started?
No, 1 verse 21.
1 verse 21, but before that, because you started reading from 1:6, is that what happened?
Nope.
Oh, okay. All right, let's keep going. Because it's what happens is the beginning of the narrative in both of these sections, and then there's an interruption, and there's a whole lot of padding in between, and then it picks up again, and it starts the same way. And this is where we find ourselves. And then, the people come to Moses, and they say, okay, we could go up. But before we do that, would it be all right, Moses, if we just send some scouts to figure out, the best way to go about this? We're supposed to take the hill country of the Amorites. And Moses is like, yeah, it's a good idea. I like this idea. I totally endorse that. And I'll tell you what, let's pick, one man, the head of the tribes, and we'll send those guys. We'll send 12 of them. Okay, that's good.
Right.
But here in Numbers, it is Jehovah's idea.
Interesting. Is it not interesting? Because they are different. Now, I think a lot of people who are sort of maybe apologists might try to conflate these two, and just sort of create a bridge between them that doesn't exist in the text, so that because one says it's God's idea, one says it's Moses' idea, and then they might just say, well, God told Moses to get the spies or something like that, or told the people to go to Moses. Anyway, there's an artificial bridge here that just doesn't exist in the text. They're two different sources. That's the bottom line.
Two different sources. So speaking of sources, Ross, what we find here in chapter 13, verses 4 to 15, is the tribal list. So we have another tribal list, and we talked about this last week, and I think we talked about it the week before as well. And the names are entirely different from the tribal chieftains in the previous list. Remember, we talked about that.
Yeah.
Many of which appear only here, and again, lacking the the Yahwistic theophoric suffix of Yah or Yahu. Which is,
I don't know if you're going to get to this, but once again, there's no Levi.
That's
Levi
exactly right.
It doesn't
Levi
have a
is separate from this list.
Yeah.
Exactly right, and that's why Levi is always treated as a separate thing. They want to be included, but they need to be separate, right?
Yeah.
So there is that. So just remind everybody, there are two competing lists. One that includes Manasseh and Ephraim, the other one that includes Joseph and Levi, right? Mm-hmm. So here we are in ours, and what we're looking for, Ross, is what I call a Josephic envelope. A Josephic envelope that encloses Manasseh and Ephraim as the tribe of Joseph. So it's like an insertion that interrupts the pattern or the formula that is presented to say, and of the tribe of Joseph is of the tribe of Ephraim, Jimmy, and then of the tribe of Manasseh is Johnny, and all this sort of stuff. But it has to be enclosed with this Josephic envelope. Well, the interesting thing about the list that we have before us,
I was looking at it.
It is kind of it's a bit of a, what shall we say? It's a mistake, a scribal mistake, and what it is that the scribe has failed to include Ephraim in what they would ordinarily enclose in this envelope. They've just left Ephraim outside of it, just as a legitimate tribe by himself. But then as they continue in the list, they're like, oh, yeah, wait, wasn't there there's a narrative of Joseph. We have to include Manasseh. And so they include Manasseh in that envelope and not Ephraim.
So let me make sure I understand. Hold on. So according to this, you help me. I'm going to read verse 8. Of the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, the son of Nun. And then if you go down to verse 11, it says, of the tribe of Joseph, namely, of the tribe of Manasseh, Gadi, the son of Susi. So
that's right.
A Joseph envelope, what'd you call it?
A Josephic envelope, yeah.
A Josephic envelope, it would have Ephraim and Manasseh in they would just call for Joseph, right?
And that's right. And we've seen that in the previous lists, and we will see it again, and I will point it out again, where that is consistently done, and it's always at the expense of the formula. So as you just read, of the tribe of Ephraim, such and such. And then it goes through each tribe, and it's that specific formula, that presentation. But when you get to Manasseh, it's like, oh, wait, hang on, I have to include Joseph here, and they've only done it for Manasseh. And so it's of the tribe of Joseph, of the tribe of Manasseh. So it's an interruption to that formula, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. But he forgot to... And again, maybe this list, minus the Josephic insertion here, maybe this does represent a very early list. I think there is something to be said for the priestly scribes, that they seem to want to really preserve the genealogies. So there might be something to this, as Milgram pointed out last time. When he said, "Look, this list also doesn't have any Yahwistic theophoric aspects to it, prefix or suffix. Perhaps it is old. Perhaps there's some sort of an older tradition." Well, these are different names, but perhaps this is an older tradition as well. That brings us to chapter 13, verse 16, Ross. And I wonder about this. I have to wonder about
what
it.
Verse? What verse? I'm sorry.
Verse 16, and I'm really interested in your opinion. Moses changed the name of Hoshea to Yehoshua. And I wondered to myself, because really in all of the Tanakh, in all of the Torah, the Pentateuch, Yehoshua, is the only clear case that we might point to and say, hey, this could actually be a Yahwistic theophoric name. Yehoshua could be Yehoshua. And it makes me wonder, by the time the scribe copied the Moses scroll, could it be that he updated it, or it might have been previously updated to Yehoshua, or was it always Yehoshua? What's your feeling on this? Do you think it's possible that his name might have been Hoshea? Go ahead.
A couple of things. Maybe it is strange that we have, this is the only, and I know some people point to Moses' mother's name, as another potential possible theophoric name with Yod He Vav He or a form of those letters. I don't know that either one of them are I know for a fact that they're not definitively theophoric names. And even if they are, you have to wonder, what does that actually prove? We certainly know later in biblical history that the name Yod He Vav He is that theophoric elements of Yod He Vav He appear all over the place. But we also see that at times, like in the book of Jeremiah, a foreign ruler assigns that name. So you have to wonder, when some of the king's names are changed by the king of Egypt, Pharaoh changes their name. Where does the origin of the Tetragrammaton come from, I guess is one question. I just don't know enough. I don't think anybody knows enough to say that this is a theophoric name.
So the question remains open. Would love to know the opinion of the viewers. Put it in the context in the comments below. But it does take us to Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 44. And again, this is a verse, a whole section really, that is not derived from the Moses scroll. Nevertheless, it says Moses came together. And this is at the end of Deuteronomy after it's been referring to Joshua, right? But here, at the end of the book, Moses came together with Hoshea, son of Nun, and recited all the words of this poem in the hearing of the people. Strange that just there they decide to refer to him as Hoshea.
Now, let me ask you. I know that I'm just making sure. We're not off the spies yet, are we?
We are not off the spies.
Okay. All right.
We're just talking
because I was looking at my notes. I said, "Man, I got a couple of things I want to throw in here." But go ahead.
There's a lot on the spies, and we have to return to that. And obviously, Joshua or Hoshea is one of the 12. One
of the two good ones, by the way.
One of the two good ones, apparently. And I can see, Ross, I can see reading the Moses scroll, the question becomes, why are these two guys, Caleb and Joshua, the exceptions? Why are they singled out and mentioned here? And the truth of the matter is that in the Moses scroll, we're not given a reason. And I can understand people asking why. And then I can understand someone else saying, well, let me tell you, little Jimmy, I happen to know the story. And it goes like this. Maybe this is an attempt, this story of the 12 spies is merely an attempt to explain why there are two guys that are singled out as exceptions to the punishment of the men of the rebellion, as the Moses scroll puts it. We find ourselves in 13, chapter 13, verse 17, and I have a question here as well. When Moses sent them to scout the land of Canaan, he said to them, "Go up there to the Negev and on into the hill country." Okay, so Ross, go up there. What it's really saying is head north into the south. And what I'm wondering, I'm curious about your opinion, is the use of Negev here anachronistic? Because south of what? Is it already known as the Negev rather? And if so, the Negev of what? South of what? South of the land of Canaan, or south, in this case, the hill country of the Amorites?
I have thought about this because
what are your thoughts?
if Negev, we often associate Negev with south, and as often is the case in biblical literature, direction, naming of certain things is associated with direction. And so Negev would be south, as you say, of what? Well, from within the land of Canaan. So I've always, and I'm going to throw it back to you, but I've always sort of thought that was what they were saying, is we're going to go up into the land, into the Negev, and that place was already known as such. Do you have another idea on that?
I don't. Again, I'm open on this, so I'd be interested in the viewers' comments, so comment below. But it does seem, I mean, when you look at the Moses scroll, Negev is used once. And at the time, they have just conquered land in Edrei, right? Very far north in the Golan Heights, if you like. And it says, and then we headed south, or we headed to the Negev. Now, they could be heading to the Negev as a designated area. They're heading down in that direction, and eventually they will cross over the Jordan and onto the land there. Or it could just be saying that, and then we headed south and we ended up at Beit Peor, which is also true. And I think probably the latter is the case. And but that's the only use of Negev, and it appears to be using it as the word south as opposed to a land designation, a location, a geographical point. So here, it seems like it's referring to a geographic point, like a location, the Negev, and therefore it seems to me that would be anachronistic. They're yet to establish the borders of the land by which that area becomes known as the south of Israel, if you know what I mean. So it does seem that way to me.
Well, what we do know, let me ask you when we talk about the Moses scroll, we do know that the manuscript strips, the leather fragments as we have them, even if they represent an early, ancient, or even an original manuscript, we know that they've been edited. Now, how much they've been edited, we don't know. But what we do know is that the beginning and the ending has been apparently updated to include the divine tetragrammaton, which we were just talking about, And if that's the case, could this text, in the form that the scribes were replicating, when they found it, did it say Hosea? And at the time that they updated,
this is what I'm wondering.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, people might think,
I don't know either. But it's possible. All we're saying is that. So you and I agree it's a possibility. I don't have a major problem with that, but it is interesting. That's right. Something to ponder. Now, geographically, where are we? So there are archaeologists that have speculated that they have found Kadesh Barnea, and it's just on the other side of the border into the Sinai Peninsula. And the interesting thing about that is that this particular location, this tell, is just below the Negev plateau. It's a mountain range. It's a plateau, really. It's a hilly plateau, and we've been up there. Mitzvah Ramon, just a spectacular view where it all just sort of drops down. But the peak of this plateau is Mount Ramon. And Mount Ramon it just happens to be that it is directly above Kadesh Barnea, where some archaeologists believe it to be. So where it says head north into the Negev to the mountain of the Amorite, that all fits, and perhaps that's why they think that this particular tell is Kadesh Barnea. But if they're right, then this all geographically fits quite nicely.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's quite a bit of agreement. I mean, there are always those who have different locations in mind, different solutions to the problems of certain geographical questions. That's why when we open up our Bible maps, we see a certain place name with a question mark, because, can you really prove? But to your point, geographically, most or many scholars have suggested, this is Kadesh Barnea. So,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and if they are correct, then all I'm saying again is that this geographically fits. It also geographically fits in the Moses scroll. This is why I speculate that I kind of side with C.S. Jarvis that Jebel Halal is Mount HOREB, but we'll talk about that some other time. We don't have time for that one now.
Yeah.
All right. So listen, chapter 13, verse 20. This is another one I want to hit into your court, Ross, because you have done a lot with dates recently, and you and Seth made a chart showing the dates that are listed in the Pentateuch, and how they kind of they're not in order, and they're not chronologically correct. We end up with narratives that are entirely out of place. Well, we have an indication here of where we are in the year.
I know. I saw that.
Right. So now what is your speculation? What we have in 1320, it says this is the season of the first ripe grapes. We also know that the first ripe grapes, they had they claimed to have cut off a bunch of grapes that was so big and heavy that they put it on a pole and carried it between a couple of guys to bring back and show everyone.
And they also had some pomegranates and figs. Yeah, so they've got all these. Yeah.
So what time of the year is this, Ross? What did you come up with?
I tell you, the first thing that we notice is that if you see the grapes, the cluster of grapes, the pomegranates and the figs, you're going to associate these with late summer. And that might, sometimes I think give credit where credit is due. There is this Jewish idea, it's put forth as a sort of a teaching that this happened on the 9th of Av when they brought back their bad report, which is usually late summer. Now, I wonder, I don't know this, but I wonder if there's an association there, because so many bad things, according to the Talmud, it's the 9th of Av when these bad things recur again and again to the Jewish people. So there is at least that legend. I've never associated a date with that teaching until I read it this time, and I thought, well, wait a minute. Could that be where they got the idea? They're looking for clues in the text. They see late summer fruits, and they associate that with, that's generally around August for us.
Well, that's August. Okay, so what I was looking at was just the season of the first ripe grapes. I didn't take into consideration the pomegranates and the figs that you've mentioned. So that well could be the case, but just the season of first ripe grapes from the research that I did brought me to the possibility that it was as early as Elul, the sixth month. But Av is what, the seventh or eighth? What month is
it's later? Yeah, it's the ninth. Look, let me show you.
Wow,
wait,
okay.
Is that right? Is that right? So look at verse 23. Where it mentions, and here's what clued me in, Jono. I just happened to be looking at the Jewish Study Bible, and it says they reached the Wadi Eshkol, and there they cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and so forth. Then it says in verse 23, the footnote in JSB, grapes, pomegranates, and figs are late summer fruits. And that just made me think, what is that?
So how many, okay, so the next question is, Ross, how many, if this is the second year, we're to understand that this is the second year, at least these are the dates that we've been given, and the last date that we were given, I think, was, what was that? Was it Numbers chapter 10, verse 11?
10, verse 11.
Okay, which puts us in the second year, the 20th day of the second month, and now it would appear we have just jumped perhaps 7 months, 6 to 7 months. Is that what just happened?
Let me just see. 7 and 8, the 8th month. Yeah, I guess the 9th of. I'm just looking to make sure. So Sivan is 6, and then you have, according to the modern naming, and then Tammuz, which is 7, and then Av, which is 8. Okay.
All right, so now listen, you just read verse 23, which is good because that's exactly where I'm going next, I do think. And but before we do that, I'm going to read verse 24 of chapter 1 of Deuteronomy. They made for the hill country and came to the Wadi Eshkol and spied it out. They took some fruit of the land with them and brought it down to us, and they gave us a report. It's a good land that the Lord our God is giving us. Okay, so there it doesn't put 2 and 2 together, saying that because we brought all these clusters of fruit, we called it Wadi Eshkol or anything like that. It just happened to be that they went there and they got the fruit and they brought it back and said, "Hey, it's all good. Check out the fruit." Yeah. Here in verse 23 that you read, they reached the Wadi Eshkol, and there they cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes. It had to be borne on a carrying frame by 2 men, by 2 of them, and some pomegranates and some figs. Verse 24, that place was named the Wadi Eshkol because of the cluster that the Israelites cut down there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how does this help me understand how this works? Is this, once again, we're returning to the word etiological, right? Where Wadi Eshkol is called Wadi Eshkol because they cut down the cluster of grapes there? Is that why it's called that? And if that's the case, when is the scribe writing this? It's become known as that? What's going through your mind?
I would almost take it the other way. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I would almost say that they called it that the name reflects the cluster of grapes. But it could just as easily be this is a place where you get clusters of grapes. I mean, that could easily be the name of it. But we get things like this in the Bible. Beersheba, we have different reasons for the naming of Beersheba, and so and these are totally different stories. But it's kind of, I don't know, it doesn't really tell us, does it?
Well, to your point though, you said that you could easily buy that they called it that because of this. So that's actually what the Dead Sea Scrolls says. So in Q27, 4Q27 Numbers, it says, with a very subtle difference, instead of saying that place was called the Valley of Eshkol, the Wadi of Eshkol, because of the cluster which the children of Israel cut down there, it says that place they called the Wadi of Eshkol because of the cluster which the children of Israel cut down there. So, okay, slight difference, but
I like it.
There you go. 1326. Now, all right, I have another question for you, Ross. Okay.
Oh, man. This is like a quiz for me today. What is this?
Have you got your Torah tablet open?
I have it open.
I just want to double check. What is the source for 1326?
It's actually P, and P begins in verse 25 and 26. So both 25 and 26 are P, interrupting a narrative which is otherwise J. So J begins all the way back up after the tribal list, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have P, and then there's a little bit of one sentence of redactor bridging to J. So anyway, this is an insertion of P right here.
And then 27 is?
J.
Okay. Well, that makes sense, right? Because what we have here is it says that they came back to Moses and Aaron. But in verse 27, it says, and they said to him, not to them, which is a bit of an indicator. All right. Okay, so that makes sense. 1327, Ross, milk and honey. Just going to say this because I know we've touched on this before. This phrase does not appear in the Moses scroll. This is the first time that it's mentioned in the book of Numbers, I am to understand. It's mentioned in about 20 Tanakh verses. 4 in Exodus, 1 in Leviticus, only 1 in Leviticus, 4 in Numbers. And am I to understand this is J, right? J is referring to the land, milk,
J
honey.
has it. And then in 14:8, it's also in this Torah portion, so it's another. But Jono, that one is P. So
that one
different
is P.
Sources,
So they're hitting it back and forth. And Deuteronomy, I think, has it in 6 verses, Joshua in 1. And very curiously, and this happens from time to time, and we may speculate about this in another program, but Jeremiah, a couple of verses, Ezekiel, a couple of verses, right? It's not a surprise. You know what I find interesting about that, Ross?
What do you find interesting?
Well, we were talking about this last week, about the manna and the 2 different stories about the manna. We have Exodus chapter 16, I think, and we have a last Torah portion. One of them refers to the manna as tasting like wafers made with honey. And the other one talks about manna as tasting like rich cream. Again, you have the milk and the honey there, which I don't know, might be worth pondering in greater detail at another time. 1333. Is there anything that I've jumped over that you want to address, Ross?
Yeah, I'm just following your list right now, Jono, to be honest. I mean, I don't know yet when to jump in with some of the things I have because you're on such a good roll. I want to talk about, and if you're heading there, then that's fine. We're going through there. Look, 13 and 14 both have this huge narrative about the spies, which we're going into in great detail. We've already said that whole story is missing from the Moses scroll, the whole idea that there are spies, but there are actually places in the Hebrew Bible that scholars now look at and say, we think that the spy narrative is an insertion. So I just had a couple of those points to bring up. We can get to them if we're going to get to them. I just don't know if you've already passed that part up.
Give it to us now. No, I'm into that. That's good.
Okay, let me just here's the reason it's on my mind. But when I was working through this, we're not going to go into a lot of the detail of this because we've done some shows on this question because we entertain the idea, and it's mainly from Edan Dershowitz's work. But one of the things that really stuck out when I was working through this particular study, and I looked at the notes in the New Oxford Annotated, and then I looked at the ones in the Jewish Study Bible, and one of the things that it recommended us do, or actually I'm recommending we do based on what I read, is if you look at chapter 1 of Deuteronomy and you consider the following. I'm going to read chapter 1, verse 21, which I read earlier. I'm going to skip a couple of passages. I'm going to skip verses 22 through 25, and I'm going to read verse 26, just to see what it sounds like. Here we go. Behold, Jehovah thy God hath set the land before thee. Go up, take possession, as Jehovah the God of thy fathers has spoken unto thee. Fear not, neither be dismayed. Yet ye would not go up, but rebelled against the commandment of Jehovah your God. And you murmured in your tents and said, because Jehovah had hated us, and he's brought us forth out of the land. Now, here's the interesting thing about that, Jono. If I take out a section in Deuteronomy, 4 verses, now remember the story of the spies, we have 2 stories of the spies, 2 different sources in the Pentateuch, and they don't agree. Something's going on. The question is, what if something so big is going on that the whole story comes from a different source altogether, and it's been added in here? Now, when I first heard that, I first thought about that. I said, I don't know that I can buy that, but because of the differences that we noticed between the 2, and then this. Now, there's another text that I found. If you look at Psalm 95.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is after reading all of Edan Dershowitz's notes today and looking up some of the articles that he brought to fruit in terms of this. If you look at Psalm 95, I said 85, 95, and look at the footnote for verses 8 through 11. By the way, verses 8 through 11, let me read them. I'm reading from the JPS because I have the Jewish Study Bible. Do not be stubborn as at Meribah, as on the day of Massah in the wilderness, when your fathers put me to the test, tried me, though they had seen my deeds. 40 years I was provoked by that generation. I thought they are a senseless people. They would not know my ways. Concerning them, I swore in my anger, they shall never come to my resting place. Here's the footnote. This has me thinking. This is a rare case where divine speech, perhaps spoken through a religious official, is quoted in Psalms. The tradition offered stands in stark contrast with other traditions that see the wilderness period as ideal, especially Jeremiah 2:2. The traditions about Meribah and Massah are in Exodus 17:7, Deuteronomy 33:8. Compare Numbers 20 with about Meribah alone. This psalm connects the 40 years of wandering to rebellion at these sites in contrast to Numbers 14, 33 through 34, and 32:13, which connect the 40 years to the sin of the spies. Now, the reason I bring this up is because this is one of Edan's points. He says that you would expect Psalm 95 to connect the sentencing of the 40 years to the sin of the spies, but it's not here in Psalm 95. Now, I just find that to be interesting. And I wonder, and I know that we've covered this in other shows. I didn't know if you had anything that you wanted to talk about in terms of, is the spy narrative something which could possibly be added in at a later point? And I know we don't have it in the Moses scroll.
Yeah, and as I said, I really lean in that direction, not just because it's not in the Moses scroll, but because of what the Moses scroll does say and leaves open. It seems like every time something is left open to an obvious question, we then have a narrative that goes into great detail to explain that question, and it's always a little bit problematic. This is one such case, and to your point, Psalm 95 seems to call that out. What I also find really interesting about this, though, is that it, and it says this in the footnote of verse 9, like Exodus 17:2, this verse explains the etymology of Massa, and it is interesting that the Moses scroll. This is going to be a conversation for a later time.
Yeah,
but it refers to three locations. Two are found in one area of Numbers, and one is found in Exodus. And it's curious, like, how did that happen? Like, we understand that we seem to have, and you went into great detail in was it your last Shabbat presentation?
Yeah.
Where you show that this is kind of two traditions of the same stories trying to pull this together. It has so much in common, yet in very different ways, but it has the same ingredients. And yet, these three locations where the people were rebellious against Elohim, according to the Moses scroll, are separated in the canonical text. They're never mentioned together as a cluster like they are in the Moses scroll.
Yeah,
super curious things about this. Yeah.
One other verse, just to kind of add to this mix for people to think about, is, and this is, a lot of this again comes from Edan's covering of the academic question concerning this. But here's the material I read today quoted Deuteronomy 9:23. And when Jehovah sent you from Kadesh Barnea, saying, "Go up and possess the land which I have given you," then ye rebelled against the commandment of Jehovah your God, and you believed, plural, ye believed him not, nor hearkened to his voice. This one verse, now I know it might seem sort of meager to a lot of people, but this one verse has caused scholars to really scratch their head, because it seems to be coming from a different tradition. It's not that Jehovah commanded and the spies. This is talking about he's commanding the people, you people, go up and take possession from Kadesh Barnea. See,
exactly.
It's not we're going to send the spies, or Moses has an idea to send the spies or the people. Yeah, it seems very interesting and suspicious, at least.
It is, and you know what? When I was reading through the Deuteronomy account, it seemed to me, and I could be getting this wrong, so again, I'm interested in your opinion. But let's pick up from chapter 1, verse 24. They made it for the hill country of the Wadi of Eshcol. They spied it out. They took some of the fruit of the land with them. They brought it back down to us, and they said, "Check it out. It's a good land that the Lord, our God, is giving us." And that seems to be the report. It's like, here's some fruit of the land. It's all good. And, I could buy that. And yet it says, even though they came back with a good report, it picks up with the Moses scroll narrative. It says, you refused to go up. You flouted the command of the Lord. You sulked in your tents, and you said it's because the Lord hates us that he brought us. So even though the spies came down with a good report, you all refused to go up and take it anyway.
Yeah.
And then it says, Ross, the complaint of the people is, because the Lord hates us. He brought us out of the land of Egypt to hand us over to the Amorites to wipe us out. And also our kinsmen have taken our heart out of us, saying, and this seems to be part of a separate story. Again, the spies come back with the fruit and say it's great.
Yeah.
And yet the people refuse to go up and say, we're scared of the Amorites. And also our kinsmen have said, we saw there a people stronger and taller than we, large cities with walls sky high. even the Anakites. And it makes me wonder, this part is not found in the Moses Scroll, and we have it presented differently in the Book of Numbers. And so which came first? Like, is the Book of Numbers? What's your feeling? Do you think that the tradition that we see in Deuteronomy is the original attempt to answer why Joshua and Caleb are exceptions, or do you think that it's Numbers chapter 14? What's your feeling?
I tell you, it feels like, I mean, it's certainly layered. We clearly have different sources. The question about which came first, it's almost most natural now because there's been a lot written in the last very short time, actually. Even when Edon in 2021, when he was going to press with his book, there were people discovering later layers or identifying certain layers about this certain story about the spies being added at a later time. So I think, first of all, I would say that there was a story that where God told the people of Israel to go up into the land. Then you have the next phase is you have a couple of different stories that emerge. One says that they both involve sending scouts to scout out the land. But again, Deuteronomy uses a different word than we see in Numbers. So they're different stories altogether. One of them has that it's the people's idea. One that it has that it's God's idea. So I think that those differences point out a fact, if you will, or at least in my mind, it suggests that these are later additions. Now, what we do have is interesting. Let me back up one other point. In the Moses Scroll, and he swore, saying, "As I live," and then we have a break. We have a little bit of a gap in the text there, which this is a difficult section of the Moses Scroll because we have some damage, I think, to the scroll there, if I recall. But either way, just a little bit. But here we do have where, according to the narrative, God swears, and as I live, yeah, that is a Hebrew phrase that we see quite a bit in the Hebrew Bible, actually, for oath taking. In fact, I have an article. Maybe I'll link that in the description below about oath taking in the Hebrew Bible. Chai ani.
And it is represented here very differently. We'll talk about that than it is in the Moses Scroll. Before we get there, though, Ross, and just coming back to the Anakim as mentioned in the book of Deuteronomy. So here in 1333, it says, and we saw these massive men of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The Anakites are part of the Nephilim, and we look like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them. These people are massive, and of course, this takes us back to the Nephilim of Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. The Nephilim are equated with the Anakim here in our Torah portion, right here in Numbers 13:33. The Anakim are equated with the Rephaim, which are equated with the Amim in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verses 10 to 11, and the Zamzumim, Deuteronomy 2, verse 21. And it says the Anakites were giants in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 21.
Man, there's so many connections. I know we don't have time. There's so many connections to things that we've done shows on in the Moses Scroll as we go through there. I know you see them as well.
That's right. And so just a reminder to everyone is that all of this stuff about the Anakim and the giants and the Nephilim, none of this is derived from the Moses Scroll. The Moses Scroll doesn't equate these people with giants at all. All right. We're in chapter 14. What are we going to do? My goodness. What time is it?
We're going
to
have to flow through this. Yeah.
All right. You, where do you want to pick up here?
No, go. I'm ready.
Well, I'm just going to say that chapter 14 seems to want to go to great extents to endorse the 10 plagues narrative of Exodus, which seems to me to be a priestly attempt to once again explain what are the signs and the wonders. What, Grandpa, what are the 10 signs and wonders that Jehovah has shown us? Because, and where is that quote? Let me see here. Elohim was angered. Let's not go into all that detail.
B3, and are you looking in the Moses scroll?
Yeah, I'm just looking at a whole lot of notes. I've got a whole lot of deep dive notes that we really don't have time for. So you tell me where you want to pick up here, because there is just so much.
Well, let me just say that we've proposed what do most people associate the 10 with? They look at this as what? 10 rebellions, right? Is that fair to say? Is that what they would say?
Yeah. So verse 20, and the Lord said, I pardon as you have asked, because Moses has pleaded for their lives. Verse 21, nevertheless, as I live and as Jehovah's presence fills the whole world. That's odd, isn't it? As I live, and then immediately speaking about himself in the third person. We don't have that in the Moses scroll. What do we have in the Moses scroll, Ross, when it says as I live?
It's got a break in the text, but it says, as I live, surely all the people who have seen my signs and my wonders that I did these 10 times. Since they have not listened to my voice. But let me just say that Edon translates it, as I live, all the people who perceive the declarations and affirmations that I made 10 times over and did not have faith or heed my voice. I find this to be very compelling. And Edon's reasoning there, it opened up a different understanding than what I saw when I first looked at the Hebrew.
Me as well.
But I think it's pretty convincing. In other words, the people rebelled. They saw they heard the declarations. And God said, "Go up," and they wouldn't even go up.
Yeah, and so this is the implication is, again, just to put this in different words. The implication is that the 10 affirmations and declarations, or the 10 signs and wonders, even is the 10 dictates, the 10 words of the covenant, and which we are to understand, both from Deuteronomy and the Moses scroll and from Exodus, was spoken audibly to the people, and in an awesome way that freaked them out. I mean, they came to Moses afterwards and said, "Please, can we not have any more of this, because it's just doing our head in." And even so, what he's saying, what it appears to be said in the Moses scroll is, even though I spoke to them these 10 times, my 10 words, my 10 signs and wonders, or my 10 affirmations, they have refused to go up and do what I have told them to do. How can this be? And so you can understand the great disappointment and displeasure of Elohim in the Moses scroll in this situation. But here in Numbers, nevertheless, as I live and as the Lord's presence fills the whole world, none of the men who have seen my presence and my signs, it is made to say, that I have performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, and who have tried me these many, many times, these 10 times, I guess, and have disobeyed me, shall see the land that I promised on oath to their fathers. None of them, except for Caleb and when it goes to talk about Joshua as well. Yes, these 10 times that they've tried me in the wilderness.
Yeah, and I was going to say, just as you read that, it really presents a story underlying maybe even later sources that there's a rebellion that takes place. And the rebellion is against God's word, and God's sentence, he's not allowing them to go into the land because he actually gave them the order to go up and take possession, and they refused. That seems to be at the heart of all the different stories, even though they might differ in other parts, So I always find that to be kind of interesting as well. Now, did you come across in your notes, I know we're pressed, but in between Numbers 13 and 14, both have stories. Did you see anything that talked about how the academics see this as weaving together two totally distinct narratives of the spy story? Did you run across any of that?
I don't know. I'd be interested to see what you have there. I was just going to mention
go ahead.
that my signs and my wonders in the first person, the only place that that's found in the Torah is Exodus chapter 7, verse 3. And that is this is priestly material, and that is the introduction of the story of the 10 plagues that they want to say, these are, answer that question. What are those 10? Go ahead, Ross. So what did you find?
Interesting. Well, what I wanted to do was ask Ezra and I know he gave some in the introduction, but I just want to ask him if academics see different sources identifying different strands or different narratives about the spies. Can I do that?
Let's go.
Absolutely, they do. Numbers 13 and 14 are a classic case of what scholars call a composite narrative. The spy story, as we have it now, shows signs of being stitched together from at least 2 traditions, possibly more. In one version, which is usually attributed to the priestly source, the mission is clearly commanded by Yahweh. There's an organized list of 12 named tribal representatives, and the report is methodical, focused on agricultural abundance and military reconnaissance. It reflects the priestly writer's concern with order, structure, and institutional legitimacy. But then there's another layer, probably from the older Yahwist or Elohist strands, where the tone is more spontaneous and emotional. In that version, it seems like the people themselves demand the scouting mission, as we saw echoed in Deuteronomy's retelling. The focus shifts from the land's bounty to the people's fear, rebellion, and divine punishment. These versions don't perfectly align. For example, the reaction to the spies' report swings rather wildly. First, the people panic, then Moses intercedes. Then there's a sudden shift to a doomed military push without divine approval. That kind of narrative whiplash usually flags editorial layering. So yes, from a text-critical angle, this is not a single seamless story. It's a theological montage, multiple memories of Israel's failure at the edge of promise, curated to teach different lessons to later generations.
Theological montage.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and like I said, I know that Ezra gave us some of that in the opening, but it was just, there's a little bit more to that, and I encourage people to really look at the different narrative strands, and we'll do that this coming Saturday just to kind of highlight that. We'll really get into that this coming class. So,
now we did talk last Torah portion about the brand new theological concept of extracting spirit from Moses and then putting it on 70 elders by way of alleviating his burden, right? And we mentioned at the time that, of course, spirit is not, Ruach is not used at all in the Moses scroll. It's interesting that here in verse 24 of chapter 14, Caleb, because he has a difference, he's got a different spirit, Ross. He's two-spirited. He's got something. He's got a different spirit.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why he is chosen. Joshua in Numbers chapter 27, verse 18, Joshua in whom is the Spirit. These concepts are not known to the Moses scroll, but we find them here in Numbers. And then we have, of course, we've already talked about this, I guess, Numbers 14:29, the men of the rebellion is what we have in the Moses scroll. Here we have the men of war, I think. That's what we have in Deuteronomy 2:14. Okay. I've got. It's more likely that the text has been amended to concur with Numbers 145. Right. Okay. So I've just got a note on that here. Men of rebellion or men of battle, men of war. Perhaps Deuteronomy 2:14 attempts to vindicate the men somewhat by referring to them as warriors or men of war or men of fighting. However, it's more likely the text has been amended to concur with Numbers chapter 145, which identifies men 20 years old and above as, quote, able to serve in Israel's army, and Numbers 14:29, which identifies those who were to die in the wilderness as a result of the rebellion from 20 years old and upward. Thus, all the men of war, right, in Deuteronomy, but simply men of the rebellion in the Moses scroll. All right.
Interesting.
There we go.
Yeah, and we're going to get more into, Jono. We're not just touching this and skating past it. We're going to get into this idea, the men of war versus the men of rebellion, later, because this is the punishment, basically, according to the Pentateuch, is that this whole generation is not going to make it.
Then I can
So
make
we're
it.
going
Hey,
to talk
look,
about that group. Yep.
I'll throw one more thing in because this is where we are, this
Okay.
particular Torah portion. You remember that there was a speculation that if Shapira was the forger, that perhaps he formulated this scroll after reading Bleak's introduction to the Old Testament, which was,
Right.
I think, released in 1865.
1860 was the one he read.
1860 was the one he read. Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's interesting about that, if I can quote from Bleak from his book, he says, "It seems highly probable to me that the original narrative consisted of the following portions: chapter 8, 1, and what's this? Chapter 14, 4, 10 to 25, 39 to 40, but that the remainder, chapter 14, 5 to 10, and 26, 38, was not added until it was afterwards revised or enlarged." So this is Bleak. However, Numbers chapter 14, verse 30 is derived from the Moses scroll, which is interesting. So if Shapira had used Bleak as a textbook to produce
that's a good
forgery,
point. Yeah, he would have left that out.
He would have left it out. Why would he go against Bleak's highly probable conclusion of originality? And so 1430 is, "No one shall enter the land in which I swore, except for Caleb son of Jephunneh and Joshua son of Nun." All right.
Hey,
Look,
that's a really good point.
That's chapter 14. 15, there's a whole lot of priestly stuff. We're back in all the same, you sacrifice this one and 2/10 of an ephah and some flour and the fat and the sacrifice and da-da-da-da-da. I don't know if we want to just go through that.
Let me just say one thing about this. So here's what's interesting about chapter 15 is that again, this is what those who adhere to the documentary hypothesis have J end the last part of chapter 14, and then 15 is all redactor. It's clearly interrupting the narrative flow. Yeah, it's redactor all the way until you get to verse 32. All right, and while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a person picking up sticks. Okay, so you've got a little bit of P there, and then the very end of the story has something that ties us all the way back to the narrative of the spies. And what is that? The spy narrative uses, we say spies, but actually the Hebrew word there is tour, a scout or one who tours the land. Right. And so what's interesting is that a lot of us who have oriented our faith more towards the Hebrew Bible and even towards some semblance of Torah faith at some point or another, in Numbers 15, verse 37 through 41, among other things, it's about the fringes. You shall put these fringes on the four corners of your garments. But notice it says in verse 39, "It will be to you for a fringe, that ye may look upon it and remember all the commandments of Jehovah and do them, and that ye follow not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which you used to play the harlot." Now, where it says to follow after, that word is the same word as spy or scout. So it's like the whole purpose of wearing the fringe is to sort of wrap up the narrative of spying around. When you spy around, what you should see is that the commandments of God are what you should focus on and not the giants of the land and all these other things, right?
Yeah, and it also seems to represent an already evolved theology that they're just putting into the narrative here. It seems like wearing the tzitzit has become a show of fealty to the institution, the priestly institution, if you like. And so they're putting it in here saying, actually this is this goes all the way back to Moses. It seems that way too with the narrative of the guy that was picking up sticks. You're not allowed to carry. Remember we talked about that back in, what was that, Exodus chapter 30, something or other, the 39 prohibitions against Shabbat.
Oh, right? Yep.
And that's reinforcing that. The thing I find interesting about this, Ross, and again, I'm interested in your opinion, is verse 32. It begins, and this is an unusual way to begin. It begins this way. Oh, once when the Israelites were in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Do you notice that? It's like, hang on, I remember once upon a time, way back when the Israelites were in the wilderness. It really seems like, is this not an?
It comes across like a later writer. It's like we would say in many stories today. You say "once upon a time" because you're referring to an event. Yeah, it's all it is.
Once upon a time in a land long ago, there lived some Israelites, and there was Jimmy who was picking up sticks. Mm-hmm. This is a distant memory or a story that they want to put all the way back there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And again, it interrupts. 15 in its entirety feels like it interrupts between what is a narrative flow from 14 to 16. You have very specific stories, and 15 is sort of just, oh, and by the way, here's some sacrificial things. It just reads differently, which is one of the main reasons that it attracted the attention of those who are studying these texts carefully.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've done it. Is there anything else that you want to pull out of this Torah portion?
No, I think this is it, Jono. I think it's there's a lot about the spies, and it turns out, I guess the question is, which narrative gets us closer to the original here?
It just seems to me that they were scared of going up. At least this is what the Moses scroll indicates. They were scared of going up. Amorites, what, did you bring us out here to be killed by the Amorites? No, we're not going. And that is why they found themselves in trouble. But why, like I said, why Joshua and Caleb were exempt? It's an obvious question, and it creates a vacuum, and vacuums love to be filled by men who know.
That's right.
So I think that is what we're dealing with here. All right, we are going to be continuing with our Torah portions. We're going to be in Korah this time next week.
Oh,
hope you have a great
man.
one between now and then. And don't forget to like and comment. We love that. And we'll be back this time next week. Ezra, take us on out.
All right, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into Parashat Shelach. We traced the spy story not just through the wilderness, but through its textual layers, asking whether it was an original tradition or a later editorial addition. We saw how different voices, the priestly, the Yahwist, maybe even the Elohist, are braided together to shape a cautionary tale about fear, faith, and failure. Was this story always part of Israel's memory? Or was it crafted later to explain why an entire generation never saw the land? That's the kind of question that keeps us digging, not just into the text, but into the story behind the story. If you enjoyed peeling back those narrative layers with us, don't forget to like, share, and tell your fellow Bible nerds to tune in. Join us next week as we head into Korach, where rebellion takes center stage and the ground might just open up beneath our feet. Until then, keep your sandals dusty and your questions sharp. See you next time on Torah Pearls.